Hello, good evening. Welcome to Normal Ireland Live. It is Friday. Happy Friday. My name is Alyssa Gucci, and because it's Friday and it's my show, I'm joined by Curtis Daly. Hello.
Hello, happy Friday.
Happy Friday. And it's bank holiday
It is,
weekend.
it's a long weekend
It's
for
a long
some people.
weekend.
Let's not forget the retailers.
Yes, true that.
Which
Okay, well, I was excited. Now you've put a downer on it.
no,
But
no,
no,
no, no, no, no, don't do that. Don't do that. Look, happy Friday, everyone.
yes,
And
if you have to work,
if you have a long weekend, great. If you don't,
yeah,
solidarity. Because I know what it's like, you
exactly.
know what it's like working
100%.
long weekend.
But I can't lie, I'm so excited for a little break. And it's the last one before Christmas, so let's make the most of it.
I
And on
can't
that
believe Christmas
note,
is even coming into the conversation.
true.
My sound's gone
Okay, it
funny.
sounds gone funny. Oh, of
Oh,
course.
interesting.
We have
Of
a couple of
course.
weeks off and then it all goes to pot.
That's but I just turned myself up.
Fine. That's all we needed to do. Let's get on with the show, shall we?
Yeah.
Fab. Well, before we get started, remember to like the stream, make sure you're subscribed. And if you want to support us, then you can go to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support to help fund our work. Let's go to our first story. Tory MP Mal Stride has claimed that further increasing capital gains taxes will lead to a loss of revenue for the Treasury. The Telegraph ran this headline. Treasury analysis shows wealth tax would lose money. Further increases to capital gains tax will lead to lower receipts, Tories claim. Is that true? The article states a fresh tax raid on the wealthy risks backfiring and losing the government money. Tory analysis of Treasury data suggests. Internal government modelling indicates that the top rate of capital gains tax, CGT, is already so high that further increases will lead to lower tax receipts. Figures presented to the government before Labour's first budget in 2024 show that the Treasury assumed it would raise less and less money from investors, business owners, and landlords through CGT as it rose. After a certain point, increases would lose the exchequer money as the high rates put people off selling assets such as shares, businesses, and second homes. Tory analysis of the Treasury's assumptions suggests there's a lot of S's in that. I'm slipping up. Tory analysis of the Treasury's assumptions suggests this tipping point is when CGT is levied at 22%. Well, that's just speculation. There isn't any analysis that suggests this, but Melstride has claimed that the government would lose money if capital gains increased above 22%. Last year, Jeremy Hunt claimed that increasing capital gains would be a disaster. Both Hunt and the OBS were wrong. After Rachel Reeves increased capital gains tax, HMRC showed that it increased revenue by 89%, the highest since 1987. The article states HMRC said 584,000 people paid CGT, a 45% increase compared with the previous year, highlighting the impact of the Labour government's efforts to highlighting the impact of the Labour government's efforts to plug gaps in the public finances by raising the tax rate. As Chancellor, Reeves raised CGT rates in her 2024 budget to between 18 and 32%, up from the previous rates of between 10 and 28%. The previous Conservative government slashed the tax-free allowance in 2023 to 24, and then halved it to £3,000 a year for 2024 to 25. Earlier today, Curtis went on GB News to talk about wealth taxes and left them with little rebuttal.
Hello, Curtis. Welcome to the programme.
Hello.
Now, look,
Oh, it's a pleasure.
do you feel that they're just politicking? They're saying that, but you would say that they would say that. I mean, and before you say it, I'll say it, they left a real mess. So some people might say it's hypocrisy at the highest level that they are now expressing, concern after the mess that they left.
You took the words right out of my mouth, Nana. This is political posturing, because if we look at that data, the headline from the Telegraph, the Treasury hasn't come to the conclusion that the wealth tax would reduce revenue or even hit a certain point. It is just what a Tory MP has claimed. And as I said, it's political posturing because they don't support wealth tax. Now, often with economic models, you can pretty much claim anything. You can use your own data to support your own bias. You could have two people look at the same data and both could extrapolate tiny bits of information to support their cause. It's better to look at what actually happens. Now, I'm no supporter of Labour and certainly not a supporter of Rachel Reeves, but she increased capital gains tax and it brought in more revenue. In fact, 89% increase in revenue, and these numbers were released by HMRC, reported in the Financial Times. So rather than speculation, we can look at the facts, and increasing capital gains tax brought in more money. Where I disagree with the entire premise is that increasing capital gains isn't a wealth tax.
But it just smacks of the politics of envy, constantly taxing those who've done well for themselves, who earn a bit more money, and who already are paying so much more to the exchequer than those who are obviously not earning as much. Is it intrinsically fair to keep taxing the richer, those higher earners?
Well, you're making a moral argument. I'm making an economic argument. I can touch upon the moral argument if you want. But the one thing that is a good policy, again, I'm not supporting Rachel Reeves, but increasing capital gains tax, it should be equalised to income tax. I would say it's morally wrong that people are being taxed more for their work than those who are sitting on assets. It's also important to understand that when it comes to income tax, yes, middle class and richer people are paying quite a lot of tax. But we're not talking about income tax. We're talking about a wealth tax. And once again, the political class have got it wrong. I mean, last year, Jeremy Hunt said increasing capital gains would be a disaster. The OBR said the same thing, yet they were embarrassingly wrong. Now, look, let's pretend for a second, just for a second, that those who oppose a wealth tax are right, that increasing it, the rich leave. It doesn't happen, but for the sake of the argument, I'll go with it. There are so many things the Treasury can do, such as an exit tax. Spain has one. If you're going to try and get around paying taxes or not paying taxes and starve our public services, if you try and leave, we'll slap you with an exit tax. Now, taxing the wealthy isn't particularly hard to do. It's the political will. Labour, Reform, the Tories, all funded by millionaires and billionaires, which is why they would never implement a proper wealth tax. The corporate media owned by the billionaires, which includes GB News, hate the idea of a wealth tax. Majority of people in this country, 80% want to see one.
That's just a clip from earlier today. You can check out the full segment. It's already up on the channel. Definitely give it a watch, especially as Curtis talks about a land value tax. Curtis, I kind of feel like I need you to explain all of that to me like I'm maybe 5 years old. But there's been a lot of love for you in the comments for that clip from GB News today saying you did really well. So well done for that. But yeah, let's just kind of rewind a little bit and just simplify what is actually going on here.
Okay. To simplify, I was asked to go on because there was a Telegraph article which apparently showed that Treasury published an analysis which stated that if you increase capital gains tax, which is a tax on those who make income off of assets, off of land, etc., only when they sell it, okay, not off work, then the revenue to the Treasury would go down. And basically the idea, I need to explain something called the Laffer curve. I'll be really brief, but the Laffer curve, the basic principle says you can tax a little bit, but if you tax too much, it has the opposite effect. So you would tax people to bring in revenue to the Treasury, but if you tax them too much, people will find ways to evade or avoid the tax, or they'll leave. That's the basic premise. So if I were to tax someone really, really highly, you wouldn't get loads of money in because people would leave. That's the premise of the Laffer curve. Now, I call bullshit on the Laffer curve. I don't think there is a specific limit where you lose revenue, because ultimately, no matter the level of taxation, there are always people who want to pay less taxes. Mm-hmm. So, for example, back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, the top rate of income tax was around 70% under Margaret Thatcher. Now, if someone were to suggest that today, you would have people say, that's ridiculous, people will leave, that's just, the taxes are too high. But they were fine back then. So I don't believe in the idea of a Laffer curve. Now, this so-called analysis wasn't really analysis. It was just a Tory MP who looked at some numbers and went, We think that if you were to tax capital gains at 23%, that's when revenue starts to dip. Now, I looked at the article. There was no data to support that. It was simply a bunch of Tories saying, no, don't implement a wealth tax because we don't like it. Rachel Reeves, so this is what I brought up in the GB News interview. Rachel Reeves increased capital gains taxes in the year 2024 to 25. And at the time, you had GB News, you had right-wingers, you had conservatives say, oh, if you increase this tax, it's not going to have the desired effect. People are going to leave. And at the time, I would go on GB News and say, that's not going to happen. And guess what? It didn't happen. There was an 89% increase in revenue when it comes to capital gains taxes. It's the highest annually since the 80s. And basically, she just taxed the rich a little bit more and we got more money for it. It was very simple. Jeremy Hunt said it wouldn't work. The Office for Budget Responsibility, which should be abolished, said it wouldn't work, but it did work. So the premise of that was basically for me to say the right wingers have been proved wrong this time. Rachel Reeves did increase taxes on the rich and it worked. My rebuttal, though, is that people keep saying this is a wealth tax. Increasing capital gains is not a wealth tax because it's an existing tax. You're just increasing it. Now, what's so unfair is that capital gains tax is actually lower than income tax. So what that basically means is me and you who go to work, we get taxed on our income. That is taxed higher than those who don't go to work and make an income, but make money off of asset sales, off of housing. Now, to me, that seems unfair. And that's where Gary Stevenson has popularized the slogan, tax wealth, not work, also by the Green Party. And the idea is to not just increase capital gains tax in line with income tax, they're paying the same taxes, but also an additional wealth tax, because people should be getting on in life based on their income, right? We shouldn't be penalizing people who go out to work. But I think if you're making passive income off of things that you had enough money to buy beforehand and you sell it and you make loads more money, that should be taxed highly, especially when you think of the older cohorts, 65 and over, the social base of Reform and Conservatives who bought housing when it was extremely cheap, when you had Margaret Thatcher's right to buy, which is council houses being built by the state, paid for the taxpayer, then sold to tenants at a discounted rate. Then the prices of housing inflated and lots of people got rich off of the state building houses, off of us taxpayers. So if you're making money that way and you're contributing to the housing crisis, then we should be taxing these people more.
Why are the right wing so obsessed with this idea that if you do implement a wealth tax, regardless of whether you think this is a wealth tax or not, but any kind of increase in taxes, why are they so obsessed with this idea that everyone's just going to up and leave if that happens?
The really simple answer is the right wing, their political project supports multimillionaires and billionaires and corporations. The media, like GB News, is owned by billionaires. Therefore, they don't want their taxes to increase. It's not a complicated argument. The media try and obfuscate it and be like, oh, no, there's loads of reasons. It is simply a class war against the rest of us because the multimillionaires and billionaires own the means of communication via the corporate media. Lots of politicians like Reform and the Conservatives are in bed with these people. Some of them are funded by them, i.e. Nigel Farage. So, of course, all they're doing is their bidding. It's as simple as that. So the argument people leave if you increase taxes, it's largely BS. But as I said on GB News, even if we were to give the right wing credit and say, okay, if we were to increase capital gains tax or introduce a wealth tax and people leave, there are so many other things that people can do, like an exit tax. Spain has one. So even if they try to leave, we'll be like, fine, do it. We're going to tax you on the way out. There's so many things we can do.
But why? I feel like our governments are reluctant to do things like that. But why?
Well, okay, I think that like Labour, for example, historically have been in favour of increasing income taxes, especially on the richest, right? The Labour Party is a pro-redistributive party. Less so when it came to Tony Blair. In fact, Peter Mandelson said that I'm very relaxed with the rich getting filthy rich. Right, that's the lack of moral relativity within the Labour Party. It continued obviously under Keir Starmer, etc. But Andy Burnham wouldn't probably be against increasing income taxes or restoring the 50p per pound. So at the moment, the top rate of income tax is 45% because it was reduced under the Conservatives was 50%. I'm sure he could do something like that. The reason why I don't think the Labour Party have done a wealth tax is because I think it truly would change things. Now, not the wealth tax that's been proposed. I want to be very clear here. The Green Party, Gary Stevenson, patriotic millionaires, their policy of a 2% wealth tax over those who have an income from assets of like £10 million or more is so ineffective. But it's the right journey to take because you have to bring people with you. The reason why it's ineffective is because a 2% wealth tax on something like that, it's minimal. It's nothing. Because the entire point of taxes is not to bring in money for the treasury. We don't need to do that. The entire point of taxes is to reduce inequality. So if you were to tax the very richest, the wealthiest, by 2%, sure, you bring in a certain amount of revenue and you could theoretically say, oh, we'll spend that on the NHS. But the point isn't to do that. The point is to essentially abolish billionaires. And I don't think you should even have someone who has like £100 million. Now, before people say you bloody commie or this is the politics of envy, which the right wing like to deploy, it's nothing to do about envious because I don't want to be a billionaire or 100 millionaire. I think a lot of these people have a very sad existence. I just want to be comfortable, right? But money equals power. So billionaires control everything because they have so much money.
Yeah.
Therefore, we need to reduce their power. If we were to live in a democratic society where apparently one person, one vote, like our voice is equal to everyone, then you can't have the existence of like 100 millionaires because they have so much power. So it is about taking away their power. It's not an envious thing. It's not like, oh my God, I'm really sad that I'm poor, which is what the right wing like to do. It is simply saying it is unsustainable to have a system in which you have the 0.01% having the same amount of wealth as the bottom half of humanity. That is such an unequal society in terms of political power. And to address that, you need to go after wealth, but, I'm talking about like far higher than 2%. And you need a maximum wage. You need to say, look, if you hit a certain amount, the rest is going to be 100% taxes. Now, of course, in today's political arena, that's impossible to say. I mean, even just saying in today's world, we should give free school meals to kids. You've got reactionaries going, oh, I don't think more taxes should go towards that. So imagine then saying, let's have a maximum wage. You can't do that, which is why the Green Party, Gary Stevenson and others, etc., are starting with a very low proposal because the idea is to push it into the political sphere, and then we can move the dial. But ultimately, a 2% wealth tax will do piss all, but it brings wealth tax into the conversation.
Okay, thank you for that.
I feel like I didn't mention about land value taxes, so I won't keep people too long. Lots of people on the left are skeptical about wealth taxes. Richard Murphy, an economist he's a he's more banking than the economy, but I respect him a lot. He doesn't support a wealth tax. He says it's ineffective. It's hard to calculate. There are other people who think that wealth tax isn't very good. Again, I'm not opposed to wealth tax, but their arguments, and I'll lay it out to you, are very salient, which is that, again, wealth taxes aren't very effective. Now, something like a land value tax, which is something I wanted to, I did actually mention it in GB News, but I think I fluffed it a little bit because obviously time constraints and stuff. A land value tax is far better. Now, I'm probably going to lose you here because I know you're not really, clued up in the economy. So I'm going to try and be very, very fair. Accountant, thank you, Jim. Okay, he's an accountant. I'll try and be clear and brief. But essentially, at the moment, a lot of the tax burden is on small businesses, okay? So, for example, a small business, let's say a pub, the pub owner has to pay certain taxes, have to pay business rates. Now, business rates is a form of property tax. They're paying a tax on that specific property. The more the value of that property goes up, the more taxes they pay. Now, I personally think that pubs offer social utility. Some people might disagree, but lots of small businesses offer lots of social utility. And of course, we want these people to be successful. We don't want the big corporates dominating. So we need to make sure that the economy is thriving for small businesses, but you also need to then shift the burden onto the mega wealthy. So how do you do that? A land value tax is an annual tax on those who own lands, and it can be levied on those who have a shitload of assets. If you're like Samuel Leeds and you've got a shitload of housing, and you're making profit off of it by doing fuck all work, then you should be paying an annual tax. The thing with capital gains, as I mentioned earlier, you're paying absolutely nothing until you sell it. Until you sell that asset, then you pay a tax on the in a capital gain, right? So lots of people like to sit on their wealth, like to sit on their assets, and Mel Stride, the Tory MP, made a fairly good point in which he said there is a danger of increasing wealth taxes or capital gain tax, which means that it disincentivizes people to sell land, for example, because they might get slapped with a higher tax. Now, the data shows that's not true, which is good. However, we want to incentivize people to sell. We don't want land banking, which is that individual people or corporations own shitloads of lands and then don't sell it. What they do is they rent seek. So going back to the small business, let's say I'm a wealthy person. I've got a plot of land and there's housing on there. There's pubs on there. I rent seek off them. So if you're a tenant who's living in a 1-bedroom apartment or whatever, you're paying rent, right, to obviously like the property company, but they also have to pay rent too. If you're a pub owner, you often have to pay rent to corporate landlords, but also those that own the literal lands, right? So instead of having a business rate, which is property taxes, in my view, you completely abolish business rates. You completely get rid of that tax, essentially get rid of property taxes. You can do the same for council taxes, either severely reduce council tax or abolish council tax and business rates. You've saved individual people money and you've saved small businesses money. And then you make up for it by having a land value tax where those who own the assets pay an annual fee. So therefore, instead of not paying any taxes until they sell, they are paying taxes just by sitting and doing nothing. And therefore, people then go, maybe I don't want to sit on these assets anymore because I'm now paying taxes every single year. And that will incentivize people to sell up. Because if you've got a plot of land, especially if, you don't have like you're asset rich but income moderate, right? You might be thinking, I don't want this land anymore because I'm paying taxes every single year. It then motivates you to sell. When you do that, the value of land goes down because land becomes more available. Buyers are like, well, I'm not going to pay as much. When the land value goes down, the rent automatically goes down. Therefore, rent is cheaper for small businesses and it's cheaper for tenants, for example. That is where a land value tax is far superior to a wealth tax. But a wealth tax is still important. I don't think we should disregard it. And that to me is a way you can completely transform the economy. It's not even a left-wing idea. It's a Georgist idea, not even a socialist argument.
Well, I feel like I'm learning so much this evening.
Apologies if that was
I mean, you went on
long
for a bit now, Jane.
Yeah, it's it's not easy to like explain these concepts all the time.
But obviously, as you pointed out, I don't really know anything about the economy. All things like that kind of go over my head, but I feel like I've got a little bit more insight there. So thank you. But we will move on to our second story. A YouGov poll has shown that Reform voters are more likely to be out of step with the rest of the population on political views, yet they are the most confident that people agree with them. Reform UK voters, and to a lesser extent the Tories, are substantially more likely to think they hold the most common public view across several topics that our survey suggests is not the case. Most notably, 2024 rioters, transgender status, regret, which I believe is Brexit regret, business business regulation, COVID lockdowns, Israel Palestine, and Donald Trump. Looking at the graph, it also shows that the general population mostly agree with Green Party voters. YouGov has also stated that Labour, Lib Dem, and Green Party voters rarely overestimate on whether people agree with them. Could this be the Dunning-Kruger effect? Dunning-Kruger is a cognitive bias, which shows that those with lower knowledge on a specific issue often overestimate their own competence. On the other hand, high performers underestimate their own intelligence. The loudest person in the room isn't always the smartest. So is Dunning-Kruger more relevant with people on the right? According to Futurism Mag, they say new research published in the Journal of Experimental Psychology, applied and spotted by SciPost, suggests something grim, that people who are most outspoken about their politics, actually know the least about them. The psych researchers surveyed 216 US adults living in the US. Each was asked to take a 60-question exam, which contained an equal number of questions favoring left and right-wing leanings, as well as 20 generic questions. Though the average participant was broadly overconfident in their political knowledge, two groups stood out as having the worst results: those with less political knowledge overall and those with right-wing views. Curtis, I think this is actually a really interesting poll. And it actually kind of makes me think of those videos you see online where somebody goes out to, speak to people on the street, and they speak to reform voters, and they're like, why do you like reform? And they might say a couple of things: stop the votes, blah, blah, blah. And then they go, okay, what other policies from reform do you support? And they kind of go, and they're like stumped. So I think this poll is really interesting, actually. What do you make of it?
Well, I mean, me personally on this channel, I try not to bash voters. I will happily tear right-wing politicians and influencers to shreds. They hold some power. I try not to be rude about right-wing voters, but going to be honest here, if we look at the data, it is showing us that right-wing voters are confidently wrong. Let's be honest, and don't have a go at me. I mean, this is YouGov. I mean, I saw someone in the comment section on Twitter said, "Oh, a lefty poll," and it's like, the person who made YouGov, right, started it, is a Reform MP.
Oh, really?
Or at least linked to Reform. I think he's a Reform MP. Nadeem Zahawi. So I don't know if he's an MP or if he's linked to Reform. Whatever, right? Hardly lefty. But let's be honest, I do think there is an element of truth to being on the right and being ignorant. Sorry to say, people. But for me, for example, I mean, if I go look at my personal life, there were some things I was really reactionary on. I don't know if I ever considered myself right wing, but at 9-10 years old, I talked to you about this before, consuming YouTube, and I was, pushed right wing slop, anti-feminist slop on the algorithm, and I grew up for a few years being really reactionary to feminists. It was all like third wave feminism BS, right? I used to think I was caught in the Islamophobia as well. I used to listen to Sam Harris, and he said, Islam is the motherload of bad ideas. Yes, of course, Christianity has some bad stuff inside it, but Islam specifically is bad. And I used to watch this content. I used to regurgitate it, right? And of course, that is propaganda at bay. But it was through ignorance why I had that position. Because there was a famous clip of Ben Affleck, Sam Harris, and Bill Maher, right, on a show. Sam Harris says there is something specifically wrong with Islam, and Ben Affleck says, no, you're being Islamophobic. Like, there's all conservative scripture within religion. You're just being Islamophobic. I watched it. Ben Affleck, what a shit lib. What a shit liberal. And Sam Harris, oh, he's so based, right? I had these views. And again, it was because of propaganda, because I was young. But how I got out of these views is when I asked more questions. I started thinking, am I right about this? It was the inquisitiveness of me learning more by saying, actually, there's so much that I don't know. Maybe there's more to learn. And I do find in the UK and America, particularly if you're on the right wing, there is an absence of that. It's nope, we are right. If we look at, say, okay, when the left lose an election, whether it's Jeremy Corbyn in 2017 or whatever, right? Of course, we will say, yes, there are systemic issues against us. Yes, there is massive media bias. I mean, the 2019 media campaign against Jeremy Corbyn was something else. Okay, so we are blaming others for it, but we still always look inward. We still say, okay, the 2017 election, fantastic result in a sense of reversing the trend of Labour losing votes. Jeremy Corbyn got a hung parliament, 40% of the vote. You know, he stayed on as leader. These were fantastic, but we all said, but one, we didn't win a majority, and there were so many red wall places that still didn't turn out for Corbyn, and he shored up safe seats, for example, which is why high vote share, not high amount of seats. The left still said there are things that we got wrong and we need to improve on. When you hear the right wing lose, oh my God, they make everything excuse. Liz Truss, for example. Liz Truss was prime minister for, was it 3 weeks? 3 weeks? And she was terrible. She announced unfunded budget before people kick off and say unfunded. I thought you support MMT. I do support MMT, but you still need to prove to investors where you get the money from. Right, entirely different conversation. I digress. Liz Truss, right, was like, here's unfunded tax cuts and crashed the economy and spooked all the people, investors and stuff, right? She herself was to blame for her stepping down, right? Yet now she goes around saying, the deep state got me. Nefarious people got me. And this is the fall of the West. And right-wingers seem to think that everyone agrees with them. But the reason why they're not successful is because there is some exterior motive that's stopping them. Oh, everyone is really socially conservative. Everyone loves the rich. Everyone's a massive transphobe. It's just the trans right activist or the lefty lawyers or like somehow left-wingers have some kind of institutional power. And they can never understand that actually, no, your views are fucked and people don't support it. Now, I, as a leftist, can say polling shows, so I can use data, that a lot of people are quite progressive and left-wing on economic policies, right? But there's a bunch of social views that I have that are not popular with people. And let's say I'm a leader of Labour and I'm like, right, my economic policy is left wing. Socially, I'm super progressive and I'm really pro-migration. And I lost the election and data showed, you lost it because you were pro-migration, right? I wouldn't turn around and say, no, everyone's pro-migration, but, we were taken down by some deep state. Well, no, clearly this particular policy wasn't popular and this is why we lost. So there's introspection on the left, and introspection means you're a bit more intelligent. Asking questions, understanding that knowing what you don't know is also important. So the Dunning-Kruger effect basically says, if you feel like you know that all there is to know, right, you're going to be wrong because, of course, there's so many things you don't know. And two, that just shows how thick you are because you're so confident in your ignorance. Whereas the left would say, there's actually a bunch of things we don't know. And I think there's a reason why there's a correlation between right-wing reactionary politics and anti-science, because science, the core of science is about saying I am ignorant. When it comes to a scientific hypothesis, as scientists will say, I've got a hypothesis that this does this, right? I think this does this. Their own goal is to disprove their own hypothesis, not prove it. They will do the best they can to prove that what they're saying is wrong. And when they can't do that, that's when they go, I might have a point. Then they get a bunch of other scientists, do a peer review, and then they look at the evidence. Sorry, the whole point is being humble. The right wing, out of all factions, are more anti-science, whether it's vaccine skepticism, whether it's climate skepticism. Some people say that the flat earth shit. And let's be honest, there's also a religious aspect. A lot of very religious people are anti-science. They think, oh, God says this is true, or this book says this is true, must be it, and science is lying to you. Well, science is humble, whereas religion isn't. Now, I appreciate, of course, in a more progressive secular society, less and less people are, taking the doctrine, at face value. But there is more of a link between religion, organized religion, and the right wing than the left wing.
I feel like I want more studies done on this. I want more psychological studies done on, what kind of personality traits might make you more left or right leaning, and because there must be some kind of science behind it.
Well, I did. I saw this TikToker, I forget his name. I think he's American, and he does a lot of these videos. It would have been great if I had a video of it, but I can't remember where to find him. But he literally talks about the science between left and right wing politics, and he basically said right wingers, conservatives, have more fear. they fear more than left wingers. Therefore, fear mongering, like migrant bashing, works more because there's that fear element to it.
Already.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's something within the way that right-wing politics is or right-wing talking points are presented by politicians in the media that is perhaps more digestible in some ways, so therefore it's easier for people to,
Well,
not that I
okay.
necessarily think that, but I'm just kind of, wondering out
Yeah.
loud if there is a reason why people are so confident, or that they're confident. I think a lot of the right wing are quite they have confidence in regurgitating what they've heard, but actually then when you kind of get into it a little bit more, they haven't really got much substance behind it. They're just kind of repeating a lot of talking points. Is it that the right just have some catchier sayings, or
Well,
it's
I
easier to
think
digest? They don't focus on facts and figures as much, so it's not as difficult to remember.
I think yes, that's true. I do think the right rely more on platitudes. But first of all, no one is above propaganda. That includes the left, that includes the centre, the liberals, rather than the right. So this isn't just saying, oh, right wingers are dummies and stupid.
Yeah, because
The left can be incredibly stupid as well.
and I actually do kind of dislike that notion to just like shit on people's intelligence essentially. And I also think that when you start to do that, you are also going to lose them in the argument, because it's like, now you've insulted me. Do you know what I mean? Now you're saying that I'm thick and I'm not.
But I think you can escape ignorance. So if I were to say, look, I think that right-leaning people are a bit more ignorant, I think it's something you can escape. So by just learning more.
Yeah.
To go to your question about like why is the right wing a bit more successful, because that's kind of what you're alluding to. It's interesting in that data from YouGov. The Green Party, Green voters have more in common with the rest of the country.
Yeah.
Okay. So not only are they the least confident, so Green, Labour, Lib Dem are the least confident that people agree with them. The Greens like share the majority opinion. Okay. There are obviously caveats in certain policy areas, but broadly, the Green Party's policies is favoured by the country, especially in the economy, right? Then why are the Greens not breaking through? Well, of course, under Zach Palancy's leadership, it did slightly break through. Of course, Andy Burnham has maybe, stopped that a little bit. Obviously, there's lots of reasons: media propaganda, the fact that we have a first past the post system, that people still wedded to the two main parties and scared to let go of Labour. That's true, but there's also something else, and I think this is what the left needs to contend with. Okay, the left are not popular. They are not popular. We are not popular. A lot of our policies are. And I fear that too many people on the left seem to think the left are more popular than they are. They seem to think, oh, because we've got a lot of the economic policies or a lot of the policies that people agree with, that means the left are really, really popular. I think the opposite is true. Now, why is there sort of a big gap between that? Again, I've told you about media propaganda, but I also think the left, the way we're seen, we're not well liked. So when you attach policies to the left, I think they become less popular. Because when you say renationalization of public services, increased taxes on the rich, more investment, etc., okay, the majority of people do not conflate that with left-wing politics. They just say, well, that seems like common sense to me. Okay. I think it sometimes in our own heads, because we can often be in our own bubbles, we think, oh, these are Green Party policies, therefore people must love the Greens by and large because they're the same policies. But you'll find, especially if you speak to an average voter, you'd be like, oh my God, I agree with you on this. And they say, oh, this is why I'm voting reform. They go, why? Again, media propaganda, but I also think the left are not popular in this country and the right wing are better at messaging. But I also think they're more willing to drop, by and large, less popular policies if they don't think it's going to go well. The left sometimes don't do that. And I think the left need to understand we are trying to build a majoritarian movement. Therefore, sometimes we do have to incorporate the majority of people's views. Of course, there are red lines, economic red lines, social justice red lines, not throwing minorities under the bus. But there's certain ways you can package things. Like when I go on GB News, I speak very, very different, right? When Ben goes on Tube News, he wears a suit and a British flag, right? It's ironic, I guess, but he's also speaking to a very right-wing audience. I think it's important to do that. I would not speak to a lot of right wings the way I'm speaking to you right now or to our audience, because it's a different audience. It doesn't mean you're selling out. It's just being smarter with your arguments. I want to see that more on the left. It doesn't mean you're watering down any of your principles, but I think it's just making us more palatable to the rest of the population. Because again, I don't think the left are very popular.
And I will move on in a sec, but I've said it before as well that I do find um a lot of the conversation around politics is not particularly uh I think it's alienating in a lot of ways, and I think it's done on purpose to keep people ignorant, so that the kind of arguments that are easy to regurgitate
Mm,
are what people kind of hold on to, because it's easier than having to kind of put in the effort to educate yourself or to have more than just maybe a surface level kind of understanding.
mm.
But I
It's
think it
also
kind
hard
of
to
is
break
done like
people's
that on
feelings.
purpose.
Like, I remember, again, when I was younger, when you have certain reactionary opinions, I wouldn't read the Daily Mail, but I would see online headlines of the Daily Mail, and it'd be like, migrant family claiming all these benefits, blah, blah, blah. And I used to be fucking furious, like more angry than I've ever been. In fact, I was more angry when I had certain right wing views that was basically indoctrinated into me, right? I remember I was really angry. And therefore, it's so hard to get out of that because it's such an emotional thing. And you find that people on the right are a lot more angrier than people on the left because of these very emotional stories of migrants taking your jobs, their family are doing, like, it's because the language that is used is very emotive, the way the media presents is very emotive. And the left, I think, are more nuanced, like data as well. But that is obviously where the left has failed a lot. Of course, we have left populist arguments. Zach Clancy's doing the same. I like to try to lean into left populism as well. But like, I remember being more angry when I was never, again, I don't consider myself right wing back then, but like, I just had stupid opinions because I was young. Again, I asked myself more questions and became less ignorant, and then I learned more. But I think we really have to understand that the left are not popular. In fact, I just sort of seen one comment in the chat, I didn't see who it was from, which is really true. The things the left are associated on is like, oh, trans rights activists or loving immigrants, and everyone has to house refugees. Obviously, like, lots of BS stuff, right? But the left are never ever really, or I don't think there's a connection with the majority of people when it comes to reducing the power of the corporates and billionaires, hating AI, and redistributing wealth and power, and actually have the policies that support the working class.
We're going to leave it there and move on to our final story. But before we do, it's 2026. We really want this year to be big for Turn Left. We want to be more ambitious than last year and to really put us on the map. We would like 2026 to be the year where we can have a full-time studio and for our contributors to be paid for the work that we do. Your support over the years has been amazing, and we are ready to take this to the next level. We rely on small donations, so if you want to be part of a media organisation that seeks to destroy the oligarchs, then please head over to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. There you can support us monthly on Patreon, or there is another link for a one-time contribution. You can also become a YouTube member for 99p. Thank you. So on to our final story. At least 547 people are reported to have died and a further 977 unaccounted for, according to reports coming from the Nepal-Tibet border that has been hit by devastating flash flooding and mudslides on Wednesday. The landslide was initially thought to have been caused by an earthquake. However, the US Geological Survey later confirmed that the disaster was caused by a glacial collapse when a glacier or part of a glacier disintegrates. The impact of the collapsed glacier hitting the bottom of a valley was so powerful that it registered a magnitude of 5.2. Traveling 62 miles downstream, the water and ice picked up mud and debris along the way, causing devastating effects to towns and roads along the Lende Kola, Trishuli, and Bote Koshi rivers. While scientists are still piecing together exactly what happened, could climate change have played a role? Well, a series of intense heat waves has hit the region since the start of the year, as well as around the globe. And according to Dr. Hamish Pritchard from the British Antarctic Survey, the ground temperature near the site of the collapse hit its highest point in 2 years. Speaking to the Science Media Centre, he said, these high temperatures would have weakened the snowpack, filled crevices with water, and thawed the bonds between ice and rock that hold these glaciers in place. According to data from the World Glacier Monitoring Service, the mass of the world's glaciers have been steadily declining since the 1950s. Many scientists around the world put the high level of ice cap and glacial melting down to human-induced climate change, as average global temperatures are creeping closer to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. Speaking to The Guardian, Dr. Richard Waller, a senior lecturer in physical geography at Keele University, said the progressive loss of snow and glacier ice results in the surface being less reflective, so it absorbs more solar energy and heats up. In combination with atmospheric warming, this is leading to the melting of mountain permafrost. Think of the high mountains like this as shattered bedrock glued together by ice-filled joints. As the permafrost and the ice-filled joints melt, then there's the potential for these types of catastrophic failure. Naturally, those that deny the effects of climate change have been quick to make their thoughts known online. Reposting CCTV footage from the disaster, comedian Daly said, if people don't get that global climate change is the primary issue that threatens us all right now, they never will. Among the many responses, one account tweeted, for crying out loud, it is absolutely nothing to do with climate change, which is made up BS. You can care about the environment and your fellow man without buying into such nonsense. And of course, there are many other comments, from people stating that climate change is just a natural cycle that the planet has gone through for centuries. So, Curtis, while we are not climate experts, obviously, we can acknowledge that we've just had the hottest summer on record in the UK. There's wildfires everywhere, and surely natural disasters like what's just happened in Tibet and Nepal we're going to see them more frequently.
Homage to Gilly, by the way, a disaster on foreign policy, but obviously he's right, thankfully, in climate change. I mean, that footage was absolutely
It's harrowing, yeah.
Like, it was hard to watch. I watched it a couple of days ago, and obviously just seen it just again. Really, really hard to watch. I mean, when I heard about the disaster, I did not know it was at that scale. I think up to 1,000 people are dead and missing, like combined, because obviously it's Nepal, and Tibet. Yeah, really hard to watch. Again, I'm not a climate expert. However, you don't need to be a climate expert to see what's happening globally. And of course, yes, I know that is just Twitter. Okay, it's a microcosm really of society, but climate skepticism, it's creeping its way up. There's polling that shows that people's attitude towards net zero by a specific time is softening. And I'm talking in the UK context here. Of course, majority of people are definitely pro dealing with the climate, right? That's just true. People like green stuff. We're a very pro-green country, which is good. But it is softening. And of course, you cannot have this conversation without right-wing forces muddying the waters, like reform. I mean, Richard Ty saying stuff like net stupid zero. And then he tries and speaks to the media and say, I'm not denying man-made climate change. I just think it's maybe not quite as clear as what the scientists make it out. Like, you're trying to do a low-level denialism, because he won't say that climate change isn't happening or man-made climate change isn't a factor, but he's trying to seed doubts because he will go further. Now, of course, the man, or not him specifically, reform are funded by the oil industry, right? It's a propaganda thing. But seeing people say that this is climate change and effective climate change being nonsense is really depressing. As you really importantly explained there, because you went through quite a lot of nuance there, glaciers are melting. Now, people are trying to say it's an earthquake. No, the glaciers melting and having an impact caused that earthquake, right? Because of global warming, because of climate change. And this is happening all over the world. My big fear, and I think I said recently on another show about climate change, is that we'll make the necessary changes when it's too late. You know, when it starts affecting us, and it has already affected us. Right, we've had flooding, we've had extreme weather, but not so much where I think your average middle class person is affected. Because of course it's those in poorer areas with less investment. Of course it's the global south.
Yeah.
Of course it's areas in which Western imperialism completely pillaged communities and plundered resources. They are facing the effects first because they have less political power. It's those that are affected the most are listened to the least. When it comes to middle class people, when it comes to wealthy Westerners, that's when you're going to see more of a panic. But by that time, it will probably be too late.
The other thing that obviously we are also going to see from further climate catastrophe due to climate change is more climate refugees.
Yep.
Which, I mean, notoriously, we don't really like refugees very much in this country, but unfortunately, these people are going to have to go somewhere. Whole villages have been absolutely wiped out by this tidal wave that's hit Nepal. Like, the survivors of there, they have to go somewhere. And actually, there's also fears that there is going to be a second kind of oh my God, what am I saying? Like a second.
In Nepal, it's going to happen again.
Yeah, so basically where there's obviously been all of this flash flooding and this huge this huge kind of mudslide, it's formed another lake which is now at risk of breaking its banks essentially, which would then hit the region again. It is not the first time that has happened, and I think that factors into a lot of comments and kind of reasons why people say, oh, it's just a factor of that region, it's just part of life, it's part of the cycle of the natural cycle of the globe. We go through heat waves, we go through ice ages, etc., etc. Why are people so, I understand the big corporations, I understand the oil giants, why is it again just down to propaganda that normal everyday people are in such denial about these kinds of things?
I can't just say propaganda, because I think if it was just propaganda, then there will be more climate skeptics, right? Again, I think I mentioned this when we last covered the issue of climate change. That empathy within people rarely extends beyond family and friends. And within that also means understanding crises, right? People can only majority of people can see what's right in front of them, okay? When you hear pundits or scientists say there's a huge climate crisis happening, it's not happening where you are, but other areas and poorer areas, people don't make that connection. And I think as well, a lot of people switched off to big catastrophe, partly because it's almost human nature to not believe in the end of the world or end of species. But also another part, I think it's easier for you to just downplay it in your head and forget about it than really sit and think about the dangers that faces. Now, I want to be clear, when people say stuff like, oh, it's climate nonsense, the climate's always changing. Yes, the climate's always changing. But as I reiterate, every single time we talk about climate change, right, it's not that the earth is on fire and the earth is going to go away. The earth will be fine with climate change. Of course it will. What we're saying is the climate is uninhabitable for us, right? It's a human extinction thing, not a earth extinction event. So when you got the Tysons of the world, when you got other climate deniers or those who fully deny the climate, they'll say, we had ice age and we had this and that and we've always had climate change. So yes, we have, but guess what? Would human beings able to live in those extreme circumstances? No, they couldn't. In fact, human life did not exist when the earth was just formed as a ball of fire, because the environment was not good for human beings. It's only when the earth cooled down, then human beings came about, or life on earth came about, because the conditions were right for us. Now we're rapidly changing the earth's conditions in which it's bad for us. And that's not just earthquakes and floods. It's also the quality of air. In fact, Sadiq Khan's, oh God, I forget the actual term, what it's called, where loads of people are really unhappy about it. It's It's basically to make sure there's like clean air. Someone's going to tell me in the comments because I completely forgot. Got a Z in it. Anyway, basically, Sadiq Khan's London did a lot of measures to clean up the air. And ULEZ, thank you. I couldn't get it. ULEZ. So famously, people outside London, like, we hate ULEZ. It was shown, the study was shown that like children's lungs have like rapidly got healthier since London introduced ULEZ because the air is cleaner. Now, who doesn't support children having more healthier lungs?
Well, it's inconvenient because
Richard Tyres, Nigel Farage?
They can't drive their big ass cars.
They can't drive the big ass
free.
fuck off SUVs, which, I'm not gonna lie, if you drive an SUV in London, it's small dick energy, isn't it? They're compensated for something.
Well, I'm not sure about that. But anyway.
You're not sure about that?
I don't know. No comment. Speaking of comments, we are just about to go to the comments. But before we do, we just wanted to update you on the latest about Palestine action. They have been declared a terrorist organization by the US. The US Department of the Treasury said it had taken action against the UK-based group, which it accused of supporting numerous acts of terrorism since July 2020. Announcing the move in a statement on Wednesday, US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said far-left extremists, their fronts and their enablers should be on notice. We will bring the full weight of our economic tools to bear. Political terrorism has no place in our society, and we will continue to cut the financial lifelines of these groups until they are eliminated. The group's co-founder, Huda Amori, responded in a social media post saying, as a Palestinian and Iraqi, the fact the country which destroyed both my homelands is calling me a terrorist is beyond hypocritical. So Curtis, just briefly, what's your thoughts on this?
Huda's comments really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Really powerful. Western imperialism has destroyed both our homes.
Yeah.
Iraq and Palestine. Am I surprised? Of course not. But look, it's the so-called free speech America, right? Who are clamping down on free speech. I remember then Elon Musk was like, oh, we need to bring free speech to the UK.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously the right wing talk about free speech, but actually they've just completely, first of all, like, meddled in with our politics. Like, obviously it's wrong that there's a Palestine action ban, but like, why are they suddenly doing this? Obviously because of Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they could deal with the real fucking terrorists, couldn't they? Those that are destroying the West Bank and Gaza, slaughtering Palestinian children. They are the real terrorists, right? Israel, okay, I fucking hate it when people say Netanyahu's government. It's not just Netanyahu's government, okay? It is Israel. And the Israeli state is a terrorist state. I want to be very clear. The state of Israel are terrorists, okay? And yet they're going after peaceful protesters. Sue, the elderly lady who's getting arrested at the age of 83 for peacefully holding up a sign, is apparently dangerous and is a terrorist. But Ben Gvir, who says, we actually have a daily quota on killing Palestinians, apparently isn't. So... there's not much more I can say to this. I know it was a quick bulletin.
Yeah.
But once again, America, absolute fucking cucks to Israel. Right? America, UK, most of the West, bow down to Israel. Where's that national sovereignty? Where's all the right-wing nationalists? No, they fucking love globalism. It's Israel's globalism, global corporations, and genocide.
On that note, I think we will pause it on stories and bring in producer Ben and go to your comments.
Hello. I'm just going to test to see what the levels are like, just to make sure that everybody can hear me okay and that I'm not like really loud or really quiet. Hopefully people in the comments will just let us know so that we can go to the comments. Hopefully.
Anyone?
Check. Yep, there we go.
Usually you're all on it and now you've been slow. Come on, guys.
I think it's all good.
Okay, cool. I'm going to assume...
I'll just have to listen really
all good.
hard.
Cool. All right. It's a bit hot, but okay, cool. That's fine. We've been trying to balance out the audio. We've had a few problems. Apologies about that. So first of all, I just wanted to go to one of the comments I starred, which is people were trying to guess who the producer was, and Jacqueline did get it right and said, "I'm guessing Ben McLean, Ben McLean for producer." But I'm terrible at guessing.
Yeah.
You're not as bad as you thought you were, Jacqueline. You were entirely correct. It's based on my lack of
Ben,
interaction.
you messaged me about like audio issues. Is our audio fine now, by the way?
Yeah, it seems to have evened out. I don't know what
Okay.
happened, but it seems to have evened out.
I was
good.
you know, playing around with the volumes because people said the volumes were a bit uneven, but
Yes, yeah. Unfortunately, I don't have much power on my end because it's all through a single feed.
Yeah.
So apologies.
And that's the thing, like,
Curtis.
what we really want is to have people in the studio, but also the producer in the studio, so we can use our professional software, and of course, the producer will have the controls of the audio, can hear it, and then fix it on the fly. So
yes,
we're getting there though. We're getting there. I mean, you were in the studio on the last show, the show before that, so we're getting there.
Yeah, we'll get it sorted. We'll get it sorted. All right, let's whiz our way through the comments because I'm aware that you both haven't eaten as well. Michael gifted a Turn Left membership, and Antifa Vegan Boy gifted 10 Turn Left memberships. Thank you to you both. You're both regulars.
Legends.
We both appreciate you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. So of course we were a bit late to the show, so of course the first comments to arrive were from Michael. We got turned late, and a personal favorite of mine,
we get fucking harangued.
Curtis Lately.
Curtis
Lately
we were backstage, we were fucking pissing ourselves. I have to say, Michael, great comment.
Good
it's an insult, but come on, Curtis Lately,
it's very
that
good.
Is funny.
That is very
good.
So with regards to GB News and the whole wealth tax story, Jamie Alyssa, among many others, was saying, Curtis, you did so well on this. And Katie Marshall, who of course runs her own stream, said, oh, shut up, politics of envy. They're talking about Nana Aquia saying politics of envy. It's not telling Curtis to shut up, just to be clear. Said, oh, shut up, politics of envy is just you moaning on behalf of the I can't say that word, oligopoly. Oligopoly. Jesus. The want to privatize.
Remind yourself never to put that in a script.
Yeah, I'm not putting that in a script. Jesus. But yeah, you're absolutely right. The oligarchs. I could have just said oligarchs.
I just want to point out. So it was Mark White who was the other co-presenter who brought it up, and I didn't mention this in the main show. But if you notice that, like, I was asked a question and I gave an economic argument and there was no rebuttal. So then Mark White goes, well, isn't it, the politics of envy? Is it unfair? And I was like, oh, well, I've noticed you've gone from asking me an economic question to, oh, it seems unfair because he had no rebuttal, right? But that was because they had nothing to say in it. They had nothing to say. And it's not even trying to me like glazing myself. It's simply because the quality of corporate journalism or corporate commentary is fucking piss water.
I mean, that is quite a terrible. I mean, it's not really a rebuttal, but that's a bad comeback to just go. Well, it's not very fair though, is it? Yeah, literally.
It's literally that.
I think.
Oh, no, taxing the rich too much.
I just think
off.
like. I don't even think necessarily that it's like a morality versus like economics thing, because I think you can make moral economic arguments, and I think that's what you were doing. You were saying, hey, it is correct to do this thing, and it is both practical and correct to do this thing, right? But I think when it comes to morality, there's no moral argument which says that we should treat those with the most privilege in a society with the most deference. Do you know what I mean? Or say that we should we're treating them unfairly. It's like, no, these are some of the most privileged people in our society. The fuck are you on about?
It's funny when we then, because when that happens, we'll then use the moral argument by saying, why are we looking after the wealthiest? We should be looking after the poorest. And that's when they switch to, oh, well, no, but I mean, we have to, because they're the job creators. Then they switch to a good economic argument, which is job creators and productive people, etc., 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 all neoliberal crap. But they'll also switch up on morals and economics. They just try and throw shit at the wall. But when it comes to like wealth taxes, the right wing, they've got no hope. No one supports their policy. 80% of people support the wealth tax.
Do you know what I also find quite baffling is when fairly like average people also then are against things like that, and it's like you're in the majority here because you earn, say, like an average salary. Why are you so obsessed with these like supporting and defending these poor millionaires and billionaires and asset rich and landlords and all these kinds of things? Like, if that's not you, and I'm sorry to say that's never going to be you. I don't know if it's whether it's because it's an aspiration thing. They kind of want to, like, you know.
I think
run
it's
with
just,
the big
I think
guys,
it's
but, like,
cuckoldery, because people, you go, I think lots of people who defend them don't even believe they're going to be a multi-billionaire.
No.
Most people intrinsically know, intuitively know, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So why do they do it? Fucking cucks. That's the third time I said it on this program. Because propaganda works. It's not about, well, one day I'll be rich. I don't think that's even the case. I think it's because, well, I was told that was the only way to do economics. I guess that's it. And look, I mean, I don't know who said this quote, but those that like, the more far away you are from the truth, and those that speak the truth seem more crazy. I butchered that quote, but essentially, we've lived under neoliberal rule for like 50 years. So when you try and have even a Keynesian approach to the economy, because we last had a Keynesian government like 50 years ago or 40 years ago, then people are like, what the fuck is the point? You just want to take us back to communism and socialism, whatever. And it's like, it's this basic social democracy. And look, it's not the right wing. It is the right wing. It's not just GB News, but it's going on the BBC. It's reading the Telegraph. It's reading all corners, Channel 4, whatever, all corners of the mainstream media that are fundamentally bought into orthodox economic thinking. The OBR, which I mentioned earlier, which I want to abolish, the Office for Budget Responsibility, which was created by George Osborne, the guy who socially murdered 330,000 people. The OBR, because it's called the Office for Budget Responsibility, it sounds so grown up, and people are like, well, the OBR says this, so it must be true. The OBR is a think tank which pushes neoliberal austerity economics, right? It is so narrow in its view on how to do economics, and they've been proven wrong. Again, like they said, like increasing capital gains taxes would be bad for the treasury. They were wrong. They're always fucking wrong. But people hold up the OBR as gospel because the pundit class seem to think it's sensible economics and politics. That's why I can't stand the fucking Rachel Reeves. Despite the fact that she did the right thing in increasing capital gains tax, she has a stupid fiscal rules because the OBR says this, and she's so desperate to look like the adult in the room. So many Labour politicians are, that the OBR basically is, I think, a way in which to shut down debate. Because if you go against the OBR, the media are like, well, the OBR said this and you've done that. Oh my God, you're bad at economics. And it's like, no, the OBR is like, I think it's undemocratic because it means that successive governments have to have a very narrow economic agenda. They can't say we need to spend more, we need more tax and spend policy, we need more Keynesian economics because the OBR says it's wrong. And then the media then says it's wrong. And then the bond market shits itself. So I think the OBR is incredibly anti-democratic, and get rid of the fucking thing.
By the way, I think it said OBS in the script, not OBR, so apologies for that.
Oh.
Because, yeah, it could well have been Freudian slip because you're having to use systems like OBS all the time.
Which we're not using OBS at the moment, though.
No. But don't you run your mics through OBS? Am I?
That's true. Although
Yes, yeah,
you're
do,
telling
yeah.
me that, and people are telling me the mics have been funny tonight, so I'm very angry with OBS.
Abolish the OBR,
OBR
and
and
the OBS. Let's go.
Yeah. I don't want to abolish OBS though, because it's a free open source software based. You're having a laugher curve.
So, yeah, I like Vicky's comment of the having a laugher curve because I think that's good. And Ligella Deville said, politics of envy. Now let's go bitch about those folks with the BMW Motability cars, the BMW Motability cars. The double standards are just massive when it comes to like politics of envy. You can be envious of other poor people. You can be envious of immigrants, but the second you're envious of the rich, politics of envy, you can't do that.
I think Helena said it best. Helena said it best when Kemi Badenoch was like, "Oh, I'm sick of the politics of grievance." And to be fair, she attacked the right and the left on this. But it was like, well, the politics of grievance. What about, I don't know, attacking migrants and poor people? That's the politics of grievance. Whereas actually saying we have a very unequal society in which we have a housing crisis, and that's because we have not a housing shortage, but a housing hoarding problem. You could call it a grievance, but it's a real fucking grievance. You know, I think it's a real grievance that billionaires can buy democracy. It's not a grievance that someone is claiming X amount of money on PIP.
Yeah, absolutely. I just remembered. I was going to cycle back to something that was said earlier. Why do people tend to? Alyssa asked, like, why do people tend to support the politics of the rich, essentially? And I do think part of it is also just living vicariously through rich people. Like, they know that they'll never be winners, so they sort of like buy into it by saying, "Well, Elon Musk is." Yeah, like, do you know what I mean? Like, I can't be rich, but I can be on their team, and they're winning, and that's good because, like, yeah, I think.
I shared a tweet in our group chat, didn't I, earlier, Ben? The tweet where it said, someone said, someone said, like, "Oh, I don't care that Trump's a paedophile. I just want him to destroy the left." I was like, oh my God. Like, what do we do with these people?
Yeah.
What do we do with these people? If they're like, "Oh, I don't give a fuck that he's a paedophile. I just want to smash him to death." Like, that's team sports to the maximum. I'm like, no. I kind of fucking hate paedophiles.
Yes. Yeah.
I think that's a good point you're making there, Ben. Yeah.
Just a critique, or a possible critique. I don't know if it was supposed to be read as critique, but a critique that comes from a more accelerationist lens. Chip Diamonds 2 said a wealth tax doesn't cure the issues of capitalism. It just puts capitalism on life support in its end stages. What do we sort of think of this argument? It's sort of a bit. I read it as a bit accelerationist, but I don't know what you guys make of it.
Come on, get your economic brain thinking.
Oh God, it's been a long week. I think I kind of understand the argument, because at the crux of it, even if we did introduce a wealth tax, we're still going to have capitalism, and we're still going to live in a capitalist society. And while it will solve some problems, it doesn't solve the overall issues with capitalism. So I think I do get it, but also at the same time, is there likelihood of us seeing the end of capitalism within our lifetime?
Definitely
I'm not
not.
sure.
I'm sorry to be such a doomer.
I think it's like you kind of have to take the wins where you can. If that means a wealth tax, then I think that's surely a positive thing.
Well, actually, let me rephrase that. I could see the end of capitalism in my lifetime. I don't think we'll see socialism in my lifetime because there's a worry that what comes after capitalism is worse. Ben, I agree with you. I do think this comment is slightly accelerationist because it's kind of saying, well, look, fixing capitalism is bad because we want to end capitalism. First of all, I no longer call myself an anti-capitalist. I'm a post-capitalist. For those that have no idea what I'm talking about, and I think I'm sold out, I fucking haven't. It's just basic Marxist theory that basically says, look, it's not about trying to bring down capitalism. It's about understanding that capitalism is ending. What replaces it important. I do think this is, look, it is important that we make the lives of the working class better. I'm not saying that you're saying this, Chip Diamonds, but some people have said stuff like, the broader ideology is more important than working class emancipation. And I think, no, the day-to-day thing of left-wing politics is to improve the lives of the working class within a capitalist society. I want more workers' rights. I want higher wages for working class people, right? That is the number one thing, and also stopping fascism. Those two are my priority over socialism as a socialist, because socialism is a long-term project, right? But I do think it's accelerationism, because the worse capitalism gets does not bring a socialist society. It does not make socialism more likely. What it does is make authoritarian, right-wing, and far-right governments and political systems more likely. As people get more desperate, as there's more crises, right? People often turn to the populist right. When systems and governments become more authoritarian, it's great in the movies when they're like, oh my God, we've got this oppressive authoritarian government. We need this rebellious movement, right? And everything's like a left-wing movement. But in reality, as governments become more authoritarian, people look to more authoritarian leaders, unfortunately. So the more right-wing systems become, doesn't mean that we suddenly like pivot to the left. We just become more right-wing.
And also we become more individualist, like you kind of were saying about earlier.
We're more desperate.
You're more desperate, so you're going to look to yourselves and your immediate family and things like that. What are you laughing at?
Sorry, I need to bring this up just to cut you off. It's Mark. I'm not gonna blow a kiss to Marx, right? He's my inspiration on things. I'm not gonna blow a kiss to an old dead man. Sorry, I cut
No,
you
you're
off.
all good. Yeah, I was just saying, like, obviously, as people become more desperate, then you're naturally going to become, well, I think you are going to naturally become more individualist, or at least like your immediate kind of circle. And a lot of left wing kind of notions and policy is more garnered towards the many.
Yeah.
And in those instances, you're not for the many at that point. You're for yourself because you want to make your own things better. Yeah, you want to survive, and also you want to look to put blame somewhere. And quite often that is going to be somebody who is
the more desperate you become, it's the more individual, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You need space.
Yeah,
to
I think
organize, and if under a more right wing government, you have less space to organize.
I think that there is.
Someone said Chris Marks, and then someone else went not in front of Alyssa anyway.
There is an argument I think that that does kind of work in this, and that's like, well, in order to redress wealth inequality, don't focus too. Jesus Christ! Do
I'm
not.
I'm definitely not doing that.
In order to redress wealth inequality, don't look at the taxation. Instead, look at ownership and look at structure. And instead, say, start bringing like mandatory, mandatory systems to get. I don't know, financial loans can only be loaned to cooperatives for all future investments, right? Things like that, which are possible. That is something that you can do. It'd be very radical, but it's something that you can do that wouldn't also leave us down a sort of accelerationist route. And that is a version of, not propping up capitalism with wealth taxes that I think could work. But I'd say, why not do both? Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I mean, to be honest, like I think all of us broadly agree with the policies of a wealth tax, even a land value tax. But the problem with those things is it is sticking plaster politics, right? The problem it's dealing with inequality after it's already arrived. We need pre-distribution. That's the important thing. How do you stop inequality from happening? Because like the right wing are kind of right in the sense that if you tax certain people or corporations, they will find a way to get out of it. So we need to stop that system of inequality happening. And one of the pre-distributed policies is what Ben talks about. Certain finance geared towards co-ops, more democracy in the workplace, bigger companies with like workers on boards and stuff like that. We need to essentially stop inequality from happening. So again, from a social democratic perspective, we should reduce inequality. We should have wealth taxes, land value taxes, right? But long term, and this is what socialism basically is pre-distributive policies to stop inequality from happening. And that is not even just saying like a maximum wage, because a maximum wage is still a very capitalist policy because it's not dealing with the root cause. Again, I support a maximum wage, but like no one should get to a billionaire in the first place. No one should be a multimillionaire. And if you have the means of production owned in the hands of the workers, right, no one can be a multimillionaire. So for now, redistributive social democratic policies, which Chippen person, I don't get your username, is kind of right, kind of fixes capitalism, Chippen Diamonds. But long term, yes, we need pre-distribution.
Yeah. I don't think we've got wild disagreements there, and I appreciate the perspective. But let's whiz through some of the comments because I'm aware that you guys haven't eaten, and I don't want to hear your stomachs rumbling on the microphones. Poodlefish Girl said in response to the second story about reform voters believing that they had the most common views, that their views were held most commonly. It's common sense in it. I hate the phrase common sense. I really hate it. Flow Snake said maybe that's because their dear leaders keep telling them that they're the unheard majority. I think that probably plays a part.
That's true.
And Vicky Klee said, saw something once that said people who had Fox News as their main source of news were generally less informed than those who said they didn't follow the news at all.
Yes, I did see that. Probably the same
Yes.
with TV News, I'd suspect.
Yeah, it
It's
could
actually
well
really
be. Could well
interesting.
be. Yeah.
Like, kind
It's
of
like
not surprising, but actually, I think quite interesting when you put it like
Yeah.
that.
Well, I suppose if you don't consume the news at all, you could be someone who doesn't have an opinion on something and are reserving their judgment. But then when you watch like propaganda news channels, they're telling you what's true. So I can see how like you're less informed if you watch right-wing media than if you don't watch news at all, because at least those who don't watch news at all might be more like, oh, I reserve my judgment rather than making a claim, right? Probably.
There was then a conversation, obviously, about how the left comes across and how we do politics and what some in America would call code switching. I think minority communities in America tend to refer to it as code switching. Arthur Bumblefoot said, agree with Curtis here, you need to slowly guide people rather than go into extreme mode. And Antifa Vegan Boy said, and I think you started this one, maybe, Curtis, because I didn't start this one. Got to moderate your message for the masses, but there's a risk of people falling into establishment narratives going into their circles. Got to keep your North Star and not end up having a Bastani moment. I don't know what that's a reference to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I start that one, but I can take it on.
Sure.
Look, yeah, there's a difference between like taking on right-wing arguments and adopting it and reframing. They're two separate things. Like, my politics hasn't changed, but we also have to understand that, like, I cannot go to a right-winger or your average person and speak the way in which I would speak in left-wing circles. I think that's really important. Now, I think it's fair to say that, like, you've got to moderate your message for the masses, but don't fall into establishment narratives. Like, I wouldn't ever go on GB News and be like, oh yeah, fuck trans people, even though I would assume that's a popular opinion for those watching GB News, right? By the way, I mean, I know you've mentioned Bastani. What I'm saying is not a reference to any particular person. I'm saying broadly. I wouldn't say like, oh, majority of people want to see immigration come down. I'm going to go on and say, yes, migration should come down. I wouldn't do that, right? Because that would be compromising on my views. But what I would do is, and I think people get it, if, you know, people talk about trans people on GB News, I'd say, why the fuck are you so obsessed? There's more important things. And when I say more important, again, that's not saying that like trans people aren't important, but when you're going to the masses, you're saying more important in terms of their immediate thing. When it comes to migration, I'm not like, yeah, no, I agree with the right-wing framing that migration should come down. I would say that I would briefly go, like, the facts say that migration isn't an issue in terms of the economy. They pay in more than they pay out, right? However, I will just pivot to the economic message, right? Like Bernie Sanders, like, it's about pivoting. So there is obviously a danger in which the more you want to try and appeal to the masses, that some people might like fall into the trap where they start adopting or accepting right-wing framing. And of course, you have to have, again, your North Star to not do that. But you can have the exact same policy, just repackaged in a different way. I think they're two different things. Watering down policy and repackaging. I'm not in favor of watering down policy, but I am in favor of repackaging. So it sounds more appealing to a right-leaning person, even though you haven't changed anything. A good one is defund the police. Defund the police, I think, is an abysmal slogan, because I know this is a more American context, right? But people hear, oh my God, completely abolish the police or don't spend money on the police, right? The slogan's bad, but if someone explains, I think that we should invest in mental health services. And if there's someone who's in a mental health crisis, I think it's better to send a mental health expert than the police, right?
Now, that's the exact same policy. It's about funding mental health or allocating funds from the police to, again, mental health services, right? Or other areas of society. They're both the exact same thing, but one has a terrible slogan in which most people go, what the fuck? And other people go, yeah, that makes sense. So I would just say, yeah, we need to fund mental health services better.
Yeah.
That's literally it. So that's what I mean by that. It's not, I mean, Arthur says it's moderating your opinion, Curtis. It's going to be smart about it rather than going in full force. Well, I mean, going slowly is also not moderating your opinion, right? Because for me, a 2% wealth tax wouldn't do anything. I would fucking support a 20% wealth tax, right? But I can't go on GB News and say that. That's not me capitulating. That's me saying, I can't make that argument right now, but I'm making it here because I'm not sat here saying, oh no, we shouldn't have a 20% wealth tax. It's you've got to pick your battles smartly.
I don't think that comes as a criticism.
You know that fucking word? I don't know. Maybe.
I don't think that comes as criticism. I'd say that there's a lot to be said for it being unifying. You're turning it towards you go for the unity messages first. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not that economic messages are more important than, say, trans people's civil rights, but it is the case that trans people are also people who need economic security in order to live ordinary lives as well, like everybody else. So it makes sense to talk about the economic issues and make that the sort of the forefront of the issue. There's the same with any marginalized group. As I just want to say, because there was a conversation obviously about images of the left, and Alyssa said, of course, like politics can be so like the language of politics can be so like alienating. I do think there is a problem on the left with because we bring together a lot of groups that don't have power in general society. There is a sort of like a thing, and I think Asha Carr talks about this in her book, where once people gain power within those small communities, it's the first sort of power they've held in their lives, and understandably they want to hold on to that power, so their language is necessarily alienating and excluding, and it's you're made to feel silly and stupid for not understanding everything in the first place, rather than people telling you, oh, come on board, we'll take you through this and explain it all to you. Isn't the phrase the right wing looks for converts and the left wing looks for traitors? And I think that's part of the problem, part of the dynamic there. An example I'd point to is in TikTok debate spaces. Sometimes you get this thing where people have like slogans behind them, and they'll often be like fairly sort of like unintuitive slogans, things like defund the police and stuff like that. And when they're questioned about it, somebody will come up and say, "Hey, I don't know anything about this. Can you explain it to me?" And they'll go, Google it. I'm not doing your educational labor for you. And I just think, well, they're going to Google that. And let's say it's about trans people, trans woman or woman, or trans woman or a biological woman or whatever. And they're going to Google that phrase, and the first results that come up are going to be Sex Matters, Transgender Trend, and J.K. Rowling's personal website, and they're going to get all of their information from there. And it's like, why would you do that? Don't tell them to Google it. You at the very least, give them a reliable source and say, here's where you can read up on it. I read this book about it. It was really helpful to me. Blah blah blah. There's a correct and an incorrect way to do that. But that's just my personal.
You know how Helena always has a banger tweet. So good. She took that point head on of the politics of like, oh, I'm not doing my emotional labor to explain it, so you go work that out for yourself. Again, that was very woke one, which I fucking despise. And Helena shared a GIF, or even said it was like, okay, tell them to go and Google it yourself. And the first search result is, hello, I'm Dennis Prager, and this is what this is my view. And it's like, yes, you're getting like a far right person at the top of the search engine explain it to you, and it's not good. Like it is our job to educate people, like as a mixed color person, and a white person might say something really ignorant. I won't say to them, you're a white person, I'm a mixed race person, and it's not my place to fucking tell you how ignorant you are. It is my fucking place, because if I don't tell you, then someone else is going to tell you, and it could be a person of color on the right tell you, and they go, well, this person of color who's right wing told me. So like it is my duty, because as a collective, like I feel like it's a very like the left wing did not escape neoliberalism. Because part of the point you made, which is what Ash Sarkar made, was that because again we don't have any institution of power, therefore the only form of power we can have is get like a one up on somebody else, like clout chasing. On Twitter, I'm the most maximum left I can possibly be, and someone who isn't quite as left wing as me, I'm going to call them out. Now that doesn't help the wider movement, but it does give you a sense of power and clout, which is very individualist. I think that, in a way, these aspects of woke one is an aspect of neoliberalism, because it's like, I don't have a duty to my community. So by saying I shouldn't have to explain it to you, sort yourself out, that to me is very neoliberal. Whereas actually, you, everyone watching, have a fucking duty to their community, to society, to part ways with any knowledge they can. You know?
Yeah.
It'll be very hypocritical of me to say, whilst co-hosting and being a guest on the show, you go do your own research. No.
Yeah. Just to be clear, though, there is a version of it which is just like horrible, which is like going around like expecting I don't know, Jewish people to explain Israeli politics to you or stuff like that, you know, or you know, explain their views on Israel, and or Muslims expected to, you know, like would explain their views on Saudi Arabia and stuff like that. Just like unnecessary sort of like digging at people's identity. That's different to if somebody is advocating for something, they should generally be willing to explain it in a way that's like,
yeah, I agree,
palatable to somebody that's like new to the whole subject. Should we whiz through the last few comments? So in relation to the last story about climate change, the story about Nepal and Tibet, Michael said the experts were 100% correct, but we shouldn't trust them, right? And sadly, other Michael has also said, the Red Cross has said, the biggest thing they need at the moment is body bags. It's horrible. It really is. Yeah, it's horrible. But John Pullen sort of pulled the second and third stories together, and said that the Dunning-Kruger effect is strong with the right, especially when it comes to the climate. And I thought that was a good comment to end on, because it just pulls those last two stories together, and arguably the first story, because of course it's the Dunning-Kruger effect with the right thinking that they know much more about economics than they actually seem to.
Yeah, and I think like when it comes to climate science, it's solidly in favor of saying there is a man-made climate change. Like 99% of scientists say so. So it's very Dunning-Kruger.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, I will let you guys close out. Thank you very much. You've been absolutely fantastic. Superb.
Thanks. Perfect. Well, another Friday done. Another show is over. We can go and enjoy our
I could have gone
weekend.
for, what's it, 9:10? I could have gone for another like fucking hour.
I know. I feel, yeah, you were really getting, you had some very good points, I feel, this evening. It's really like insightful points, and we covered a good cross section of stories there as well, I feel.
9:10 though, we need to get better at like being
a bit more timely.
Our shows go from like hour and a half to like 2 hours, and technically the show's only supposed to be like an hour.
Well, I mean, we didn't go live at 7:30, so it probably is about an hour and a half. I think that's
it's the weekend though, so yeah.
On that note, thank you to everybody who has tuned in this evening. Thank you to producer Ben. Thank you to Curtis for joining as our guest this evening. Remember, we go live every Monday, Wednesday and Friday at 7:30 p.m. You've been watching Normal Island Live. Have a lovely bank holiday weekend, and I'll see you next time.